I'm Jeremy Pryes, the founder and head brewer of Pryes Brewing Company, and this is the Brewer to Brewer podcast from All About Beer. My guest is Chris O'Connor, the Vice President of Brewing Operations for Prost Brewing, and he is here for a conversation that goes beyond the brew house and into topics that matter to brewing professionals and curious beer drinkers. First, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media at All About Beer. We'll get into the conversation in just a moment, but first, this message.
First Tea invites you to experiment with Lapsang Souchong tea, known informally as brewer's catnip because of the natural affinity that many brewers have towards using Lapsang in stouts, sours, and porters. Lapsang Souchong is deeply smoked with woody tannin character. It dances divinely with citrus, raspberry, and vanilla. A little goes a long way. Curious to try for yourself? Email info@firsttea.com. That's FIRSDTEA.com to learn more about using Lapsang Souchong and dozens of other teas from First Tea.
I'm Mike Stone from Jackrabbit Brewing Company in West Sacramento, California. I think a lot of breweries do not run necessarily just in time, but they're pretty close to just in time ordering for inventory. And I don't know one brewer in town that gets it right 100% of the time all year. It's really nice to have the ability to fall back on just driving the van over to the distribution center and buying what you need on the spot. It really adds a lot of flexibility to my brew schedule. It can allow us to run slightly leaner on the inventory side, especially for some of our base malts. Contact Malt Europe today and visit malteurop.maltingco.com.
Today's episode is sponsored by Stomp Stickers. Stomp is a proud member of the Brewers Association that produces a wide variety of printed brewery products, such as beer labels, keg collars, coasters, beer boxes, and much more. Stomp's website features an easy-to-use digital design tool, low quantity orders, fast turnaround times, and free domestic shipping. Visit stompstickers.com and use code BREWER for 15% off of your first order.
Okay, let's get into it. A bit about my guest today. Christopher is the Vice President Brewing Operations for Prost Brewing Company and Vice Chair of the Colorado Brewers Guild. For the first 8 years of his career, he started in biotech, working in everything from quality assurance, compliance, operations, and process engineering. Eventually, he found his way into brewing. He spent nearly 6 years with a contract brewer as the Director of Quality and Technical Brewing before he was given an opportunity to join the Prost team. Over the past 4 years, Prost has been working towards the build-out of their new production facility in North Glen, Colorado. This 60,000 square foot production facility combines the best of traditional German brewing practices and state-of-the-art equipment. Prost built the facility to faithfully create some of the most authentic German styles possible. That's why they partnered with Kasper Schultz for the brewhouse and fermentation lagering tanks. Hey, Chris, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Jeremy. Honored to be here. Super excited about this podcast. It's one of the few that I actually listen to on a regular basis, so this is exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really fun to do these things, and it's good to get the message out to all of our brewers, and it's just nice to show that we're all together. But just got a couple of questions for you. My first and foremost, what got you into brewing?
My journey to beer was a fun one. I actually spent my senior design project at the University of Colorado with Spetzel Brewing in Shiner, Texas. We got to work on their wastewater treatment facility. I think they actually ended up putting it in, but I never really followed up after I graduated college. I was too busy in my new career. I wanted to kind of go into a similar space, and that's what drove me to biotech. So when we were at Insmed that became Merck, we were basically growing yeast to feed to E. coli or CHO cells. And so the principles of fermentation were pretty similar. It's just instead of trying to grow yeast to create food, you're growing yeast to try and create ethanol. And so a lot of similar platforms were applied. Met some of the smartest people I've ever got to work with in biotech, but it was always very sterile and high stress. You can't really tell anybody what you did for a living because of NDAs. But I always wanted to get back to that feeling that I had my senior year of college with everybody I met in beer, because all of the people that we worked with, from Jaime Gerardo, who was our senior advisor, who's a legend in the industry, and all the brewers down at Spetzel, it was just it was such a unique environment, and everybody was so open and so chill that it seemed like that was where I always wanted to be. And about 10 years ago, I finally had the opportunity to make my way back to beer, and somebody took a shot at giving me a job. I basically started in an entry level position. I took about, it was a pretty significant haircut to come back to basically an assistant brewer role. And I went from there to building out the lab for that facility, and then taking over quality, and then taking over technical brewing, and then helped run ops for a while before we brought in a new director of ops. And so I got to see kind of soup to nuts operations window, which was pretty cool. It was really fascinating. The nice thing about working with a co-packer was I got to meet the head brewers for dozens of breweries and get their perspectives on how beer should be produced. I got to pick their brains about why they're choosing this, why they're doing certain things, and then I could tie all that information back to a lot of the white papers that I was reading from ASBC and from the MBAA, and kind of being like, okay, this checks out, this doesn't, like, this might just be, kind of dogma instead of science, and this is like based in science type of conversations. And so it was really like getting a master's in brewing, which was a very unique, and honestly, it was a blessing. But about 4 years ago, I was able to join the pros team, as you said in the intro, which was very kind of you. Thank you, by the way. And ever since then, we've been working towards this production facility in Northland. It's really one of a kind. We put the entire production hall behind glass, and so everybody can walk up and see it and be a part of it. We really wanted to create an immersive experience for people that are fascinated by the process of making beer and that fusion of art and science. And I think that you really get a feel for that when you step into the building.
Yeah, let's get back into the new production facility that you built up, but let's go back into like where Prost was. I mean, you guys are downtown Colorado, or I guess right on the cusp of it. But I mean, right then and there, it's kind of where, the brew house was from. I think it was that you had imported it from Germany, and like kind of like what was this equipment there?
Yeah, it was a Zeman brew house. It was a direct fire copper kettle. They originally started with 2 vessels, but they incorporated a whirlpool later on, because Prost has actually been around for about 12 years. But in that time, the ownership group changed to one person. So David DeLine bought Prost about 6 years ago, and that's when you started to see the new branding, the movement to cans, and then a lot of the design changes that we were being able to put in place. And so he brought me on about 4 years ago, and it was really to kind of reinforce the quality standards that may have been slipping a little bit. But we needed to right the ship and really kind of lean into a quality first, like quality by design mindset. And that I know is cringe because everybody's favorite buzzword is quality. But we really think that every decision starts there, and everything after that is secondary. So it's always, does this make the most authentic Prost beer possible? Then is it the most efficient way of doing it? And then it's, is there a cheaper way to do it without compromising quality? And the answer is almost always, no, you can't do it for less. It's just, this is what it takes to make beer that we consider the pro standard of production. I hesitate to say things like better or worse, because everybody's interpretation of good and bad is such a personal thing. This is the most authentic way that I think Prost beer could be presented, and that was the entire design intent behind this production facility.
Yeah, because you guys mainly go for European styles, right? Because that all Prost is you really are kind of aiming at historic styles and beers with ingredients and etc. So basically, on the hardware they're using, like what other kind of beer styles, just like looking at where Prost was and where Prost is going into, are you really highlighting and paying a lot of attention to for like designing to make sure it's appropriate, using past things with new emerging technologies and
Totally. So in our pursuit of authenticity, we import everything that we use for our brands from Germany. So we're basically all environmental malt, and then we locally source the hops from farmers directly. We take our whole hop shipment all at once at the beginning of the year, and so we were
Oof.
actually just in Germany for selection, which was awesome. I'll send you photos pretty soon. It'll be part of the care package that I'm going to be sending you here sooner than later.
Appreciate it.
But as part of that trip, and part of our kind of pursuit is how are we staying as true to what modern German beer can be, right? Like, are you being faithful to what like Augustiner Brau and like Weichstefan and Schoenraum are? What are they putting out, and are you able to make it your own while still paying respect to how that beer is produced? And one of the things about the facility design that we put in, I mean, if you ever go to Schoenraumer, it's like a modern day version of that. We integrated a lot of the similar design aesthetics. Like the brew house is multi-vessel, so there's 2 decoction vessels, louder water receiver boil kettle, and then a vacuum boiling system called a Schokoats, something that Schultz puts out. And so we partnered with Casper Schultz, who's one of the oldest brew house manufacturers in the world, for a lot of this build out. And because that we chose that partnership because it gave us the flexibility and kind of honestly the ability to tweak certain aspects of the design to make it our own. Like I wanted to integrate more marine blade design into the mash kettles to have a lower tip shear and a higher turnover volume at lower RPM, which is a trick that I took from mammalian cell fermentation and biotech. And then they actually have a innovation award for their open fermenters because of how they clean themselves. Basically, it looks like an infinity pool where it just cascades over the side. There's no spray balls. It looks honestly like a waterfall, and it's mesmerizing to watch. If I ever let anybody into that room, we differ in opinion on how people should be accessing the open fermentation suites. In Germany, they let you in. They're like, you walk around, it's wild. Like you can just walk right up to the 700 barrel opens, and they're like, yeah, it's cool. Just don't stick your head in it. And you go, oh, okay.
Yeah, right.
Whereas here we were like, the biotech in me came out pretty hard. We put the open fermentation cellar in a specially designed clean room that runs off of its own HVAC and has all HEPA filtered air that comes into it. That room is kept under positive pressure, and the lab that attaches to it is basically the only way in. And so that is the airlock. And so if the lab opens, everything pushes out, nothing comes into the room. If you were to test it, it would test as probably a class 10,000 room. We plate for environmentals once a week. We've never seen a single thing grow. It's as aseptic as I can make it for the type of processing that we do. And anybody who goes in has to go full clean room suits, hair nets, like covers. There's specialty training to even access the room. It is well taken care of.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go through that a little bit. I think that's just kind of fun, and we're cruising along pretty well. It's like, so when you're doing open fermentation and you're doing when you're transferring the yeast, how does that all kind of go into play? And what does that look like?
So everything's fed from either yeast sprinks or the yeast propagation system. So Esau Huber is the yeast prop that we ended up going with, and it's because they're partners with Casper Schultz. But we can grow yeast and end up pitching it in line with the wort. And so everything kind of floods in at once. It doesn't require an operator getting involved. Same thing with yeast sprinks. If you're pulling yeast sprink up, you can actually put the dosing in line with the wort knockout, so you can feed all of it at one time. And then again, it eliminates the need or requirements of somebody going into the room as much as possible. Now, people do have to access it, and we do go in there for regular cleanings, and then sometimes there are things that need to be dosed to the fermenters. It just kind of depends on what it is, whether it be that yeast or whatever. We're running a dry pitch or something like that for a specialty strain for a contract client, but we try and minimize the amount of people that we have in and out of that room.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, so even in that room, when you're pitching, you do have the option to pitch multiple yeasts of different things in that same room. I mean, open fermentation is just, it's incredible in by itself. And so it really fascinates me basis what I do. I let everything go, and idle force and spontaneous goes. But with that and controlling it, it's so cool that you can do open fermentation, keeping them all open, but yet still give value or have them separate so that they all still do their own independent fermentations.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We can run multiple yeast strains side by side without the risk of cross contamination just by the nature of how these tanks are designed. On the inside, they actually have CIP ports, and we can leave that open. So while we're producing CO2, the CO2 floods down the inside of those CIP arms, and when we hook our vacuum pumps up to it, we can actually collect that CO2 that's being produced. So we reuse as much CO2 that's produced in the facility as possible.
That's great. That's
And
awesome.
so, yeah, we think it helps with the finished flavor of the beer, and it also is nice to have that kind of protection on any chance that you ever have like CO2 shortages like we kind of saw last year. This provides a little bit of a buffer, and we can kind of get through force majeure while those companies are catching back up. But from the opens, it feeds to the horizontals that were also made by Casper Schultz, and those are all 200 barrel tanks. So we basically blend two 100 barrel horizontals, two 100 barrel opens into one 200 barrel horizontal. And there it just kind of takes its time until it's ready. We have we have a really excellent team here. We go through sensory about once a week on all the stuff that's in maturation and kind of trend against where product expectations are. And then when it's ready, it moves. It's not really on day X it gets sent. It's when it's ready it gets sent type of situation.
Yeah, and I think what's really cool about talking to you, Chris, and just building a relationship with you is seeing the growth that you've had since I met you at the original location at Prost, and seeing this 60,000 square foot production facility come, and kind of like seeing both sides and how they're different. Like one was a brewery, right? And so you basically brewed as distribution. Like how big, just really quick, so we kind of tell the listeners like the size, how many barrels did you guys do out of the old production facility? And then kind of like how that changes into the new one.
Yeah, so that facility capped out at around like 8,000 barrels. That was when we were all in bottles still. The bottling line was actually on a second floor mezzanine. It was pretty wild how that place was set up. There was not a square inch that was wasted. It was probably the best way to put
It was like Gotham City when I was there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's beautiful. I mean, it was a beautiful brew house. It made really, really elegant beer. It was just because of the manual nature of the operation, it would create very inconsistent finished products. And so like you could hit the most massive home run one time and then thought you did everything exactly the same and strike out. And in a package market, especially with what we do now and the amount of cans that we have out in distribution, the consumer I don't think the consumer is as willing to suffer that level of inconsistency. And so to get to a place where we could feel confident expanding our distribution, we had to integrate more automation and more state-of-the-art equipment. Now, it doesn't mean we had to walk away from the traditional roots of how we wanted to make beer. It just means that we can utilize that state-of-the-art equipment to make those finished products. I mean, for the same reason that you didn't ride your horse to work today, technology does make things better.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then it's really, we wanted to create a kind of a vision of what beer production could look like, where you still honor traditions of beer making, but really integrated all of the process advancements that we've made and automation to ensure consistent finished product. It's really a real wonderful fusion of, history and progress. And there's actually a sign on the wall in Schoenraumer that says tradition and progress well balanced. And I thought that was such a beautiful statement that I wanted to make sure that we integrated that into every facet of our brewery design. More of a time machine to the future than a time machine to the past kind of situation.
For sure. I think that's awesome. And it's nice to have that, that nice thing that we kind of attach ourselves to kind of, anytime when we're, brewing beer or doing things, is just understanding what keeps us on track and keeps us motivated for why we're doing it. It's fascinating. Well, congratulations on the 60,000 square foot production facility. I know you guys are still working on it. It probably seems like the project will never get done, but you're definitely pictures. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. You guys have done just a good job. So congrats on that.
Thank you, sir. It has been really, really fun. It's been it's been an honor to be a part of, and the team that we have here is what makes it run. The equipment's nice, and the projects will never stop because we're always trying to make it better and, constant pursuit of perfection. But it really comes down to how good our team is, and we have some incredibly talented people that work here, and that's going to help set us apart moving forward.
That's awesome. Well, now that you guys have all the toys and what beers, which beer styles really kind of drive you that you want to go to, and what countries inspire you?
As you know, authentically German brewery, we really kind of gravitate towards more German styles. That's what I tend to focus on mostly. I think a measure of skill in brewing is being able to produce a really well-made Helles. There's just nowhere to hide in the beer style. It's you either had incredibly healthy yeast that performed as you expected, or you didn't. You either have really high quality hops or you don't, and it's you're kind of laid bare against the market, and it either tastes really really good or it's really not pleasant. And I love that challenge. The subtlety of what differentiates really excellent beer and what doesn't. I find that challenge to be really satisfying, and I know our team does as well. For my daily drinking, the Pilsner is one of our flagship beers, and I kind of like that because you know I live in Colorado. We like hops here, and so
Mm.
the the Pilsner is always something that I gravitate towards. But if I really just want, you know, a 5 p.m. shifty, House is the way to start. I think that those lighter styles really help separate. But that being said, I mean, one of the first beers that really made me fall in love with German beers was Dunkel. And it was actually Prost Dunkel when they first opened.
Yeah,
It
that's
was,
awesome.
yeah, it was like 12 years ago. I just moved downtown with my wife, and they were right across the street from me, which was pretty wild. They're like less than 400 yards from my front door. And I went in and I probably drank them out of Dunkel for the first month that they were open.
That's awesome.
That beer was transcendent. And I genuinely think that the right time, right day, you put a Dunkel in front of me that's really well made. It's such an elegant like representation of what beer brewing can be. And that to me is something that really gets me going. Just balanced, elegant presentations of beer that you can have more than one of and enjoy with people around you. Because I mean, this whole thing is about community, right? Like
Mhm.
the whole aspect of consuming beer is something that you're supposed to be able to do in a group with people and friends. And even if you're sitting at a table and you don't know anybody, you're both drinking a beer, you have something in common. It usually strikes up conversation. I can't tell you how many people I've met just sitting at the bar working on my laptop that I still talk to this day. You know, it's a really beautiful thing that I don't think you get in a lot of industries.
Mhm.
And I think that uniqueness is what draws people to beer, because that sense of community, and because the people who are in it and that kind of gravitate to it are really passionate about it. It's one of the things that I love the most about you, is your passion for
Oh.
beer. And I find it to be infectious, and I wish that I could just clone that and give it to everybody else, because it makes the industry better.
I was gonna say two things. One, thank you very much. And number two, it's how I met you. So
That's
like
true.
being at Prost and seeing you, I think it was a Great American Beer Fest. I think I've known you for now 5 or 6 years now. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's been a bit. And like I think I just remember going to your place, and I think in that facility, it was just such an ode to like German traditional styles. And I was like, just based upon because it's, I mean, beer is two things, right? Beer's reactions, beer's ambiance, beer's feelings and history. And so when I walked in your space, I mean, you had like you had all the things. I mean, I think even for you have an event for just having German beer there for Great American Beer Fest, you had Wiener Schnitzel, and like you had like I think with sauerkraut, and we had like whole grain mustard. It was just an awesome thing. And then there you were, and I was like, "Oh, who's this?" And I had the big stein with me, and then I was introduced myself, and then everything else is history. It's been wonderful.
True. That was a fun time on the patio. I think it was more than one stein, but
Yeah, it's
it
true.
was a good time. That's what GABF is for, right?
It is so fun. Yeah, there's nothing like Great American Beer Fest, which just went through. But so here's a quick question for you. We understand what you guys are going for, kind of where you've been. We know the facilities. So within that time, in the modernization of still doing things and not just equipment, what kind of do you see yourself doing any kind of innovative things with any kind of beer styles? I know that, with a lot of beers that we create with IPAs and a lot of traditional American kind of stuff that typical tap rooms have, Is there something that you guys do in the different on the side that kind of innovates a little bit? If it's with products or hop selection or malt selection or anything that kind of makes it a little bit different, or are you pushing the boundaries at all?
You know, we try and stay pretty tight to who we are as a company, and that's, you know, authentic German beer. But within that space, there's room to play a little bit. The vacuum boil system that we run, I think it's one of the only ones in North America right now that Schultz has sold. And so basically what you do is you can run the boil kettle at a low simmer. So instead of like a big rolling boil where you see all that kind of foam that starts getting created, this is a very gentle boiling where it only evaporates about 0.5% of the total volume. And then that vacuum boiling system, because vacuum boils at a lower temperature, sorry, water boils at a lower temperature under vacuum. We actually get all of our 3 to 3.5% evaporation going through the shoko. So all the DMS precursor all comes off at that stage. So it's a very gentle separation of your DMS precursor. And so what you're left with is a wort that's more resistant to the formation of trans 2-nonenal, but you're also left with more of the components that result in incredibly stable and compact foam. So if you come to the beer gardens and you get a pour of the Pilsner, you can see just this really pretty tight, creamy foam, and it's persistent throughout the entire glass. I think Vanporth might be the only person who loves foam more than me. And being able to sit there in a glass, even in like a half-liter sign, and just seeing it lace the entire way down is just such a it's a really pretty thing, and it helps lengthen the enjoyment of the product because you continue to get all those aromatics that you wanted throughout the entire sign. And it was this piece of equipment really helps with that. The open fermentation suite, there are a lot of breweries that run on open fermentation. I don't think many do it the way that we do, but that is definitely something that helps us stand out. Oh, I left something out. So we actually run a Kunzel 6-roller mill. So we do something that's called endosperm mashing, which is something that only about 9 breweries in the world do. So the first 2 rollers kind of function like a football spiraler and peel the husk off of the kernel. And then the other 2 rollers actually grind the kernel. So the husk is separated intact into a separate bin, and we go through all the saccharification steps and decoction steps on just the ground kernel. The husk doesn't get reintroduced until it's time to set the lauter bed. And so that reduction of time and exposure to temperature reduces the overall amount of grain tannin that you pull into the wort. And so you're left with a really like round, soft finished beer. The difference is pretty wild. Well, we were commissioning the 2 different brew houses because we have a 5-vessel 20 barrel that we use for R&D here as well. That was commissioned on vault that did not go through the endosperm mashing process, and we compared those batches to the first rounds that went through, and it was so amazing the difference it made in the finished flavor. So like Trumer runs this way, for an example. I think there's a couple other breweries in Germany that run this way as well. Summit used to, but they don't anymore, I don't think. Susquehanna on the East Coast does it this way. It is a rarity that you find wort that's produced in this manner. And that is something where we're really trying to push the envelope. But it's a traditional technique. It's just, it's not done anymore because it is slightly less efficient. There are more efficient ways of recovering all your wort sugar, but I think that the benefits to the finished product are worth the loss in extract, in my personal opinion.
Man, that's incredible. And it really kind of goes to like your mission statement is that you're trying to stick to making traditional beers the best possible capable, and whether that use new technology or this to achieve that. I just think it's outstanding, Chris. I really applaud you guys all at Pros for being able to do that. And I remember you sent me a picture of you and you're on your back porch and you're like, look how clear this is. And I was like, man, it looks like a diamond. It looks so good. So like,
Dude,
I think what do you use for your filtration now? Or your
So we don't use any finings or like biofine or anything like that. What we actually run is a Pentair BMF Crossflow. And so it's a composite filter that is, I think, about 0.5 micron. And it's a fully automated filtration setup with really, really high recovery. It is it might be one of my favorite pieces of equipment in the facility because everything that's supposed to be clear is absolutely crystal clear and very stable. Like we are very lucky to have that piece of equipment, and it is a game changer. And we
Yeah.
also integrated that into the Pentair Carbo blend system, and those pieces of equipment talk to each other. So we take the CO2 that we recover from primary and all of the cylindrical conical fermenters and from the opens, and we actually trim carbonate on our way into the bright tanks with all the CO2 that we recovered throughout the process. And so the result is like really, really fine bubbles because naturally created CO2 tends to be a little bit finer, and there's less of a flavor impact than purchased CO2. So if you can put it in, I would highly recommend putting it in. Some of the larger systems are incredibly expensive and cost prohibitive, but some of the smaller scale ones, like the Chart Labs units, are a lot more approachable. And from a product quality standpoint, I definitely think it's worth the investment.
That's awesome. I told my wife when you sent me that picture, I was like, just talking about your filter, I was like, it was as crystal clear as in pulling water, like melted water off of a glacier. It was just beautiful. So I'm excited to get the next care package.
Oh, that photo I sent you is when I was smoking something. You could literally see the smoke going behind it in the video, like as it was smoking out. Like that's how clear the
Oh,
product
it's
was.
amazing.
And
Amazing.
again, people drink with their eyes first, right? They
Right.
see something
Right.
that looks brilliant. They think and kind of gravitate towards this is going to be a quality beer. Like especially with something that's supposed to be clear. That's not true of all beer. Like something's supposed
Yeah,
to be hazy, it better be hazy type of situation. But
that's right. Well, you guys, it looks beautiful, and I love what you guys are doing. We're going to take a quick, short break for this message, and then come right back for more conversations with Chris.
Evoke the memories of hearth and campfire into every pour of Lapsang infused brew. Lapsang Shushan Black Tea is a potent combination of smoky aroma and woody tannins that take you back to that toasty feeling of a warm fire on a cold night. Email info@firsttea.com. That's FIRSDTEA.com to find out more about Lapsang tea and many other botanicals for beer.
I'm Mike Stone from Jackrabbit Brewing Company in West Sacramento, California. I think a lot of breweries do not run necessarily just in time, but they're pretty close to just in time ordering for inventory. And I don't know one brewer in town that gets it right 100% of the time all year. It's really nice to have the ability to fall back on just driving the van over to the distribution center and buying what you need on the spot. It really adds a lot of flexibility to my brew schedule. It can allow us to run slightly leaner on the inventory side, especially for some of our base malts. Contact Malt Europe today and visit malteuropemaltingco.com.
This episode is also sponsored by Stomp Stickers, one of our favorite partners when it comes to printed brewery products. Stomp Stickers is a reliable resource for printed items such as beer labels and boxes, keg collars, coasters, and more. Visit stompstickers.com and use code BREWER for 15% off of your first order.
Welcome back. I'm excited. Let's continue our conversation with Chris. We got to know a lot about their new facility, where they came from, where they're going, and really kind of what they're going. It's just really fun. Chris, again, it's been an honor to talk to you this whole time. I love it. So such good information. Here, I just want to kind of talk on the second half of our conversations, kind of talk about more of yourself as you see things now in this industry, and how you got here in a little different sense. And kind of start off with a question of, after talking about all that stuff, like what mistakes did you make, and what's your best tip for new brewers to avoid those mistakes?
it's a great question. There's always things that come up in a build out of any sort that you don't really foresee, but I think giving yourself enough of a buffer, be that time or financials, to accommodate those kind of hiccups is important. But I also think that you should really plan for the success that you intend to have. I wish I actually had more tanks, which is funny to say considering the number of tanks that we have here currently. Uh, we were fortunate enough to partner with a lot of like-minded breweries that really value quality as the standard, and to continue to grow that and faithfully execute against that. I think a little bit more cellar capacity would have been nice up front, but I mean, other than that, I'd say always give yourself a little bit more time and budget a little bit more so that you're not, you know, cash strapped early on. We were fortunate enough that we weren't, but there was a time where you could, if it had gone a little bit worse, we would have been in a little bit of trouble. But luckily, everything worked out and everything came up Millhouse. So, you know, we're very fortunate in that regard. I think for anyone who's considering a new build out, really think about what your growth plan looks like. It's easy to just fall into a trap of just get it running, like just get this built. We need to start making beer, but keeping an eye on where you want to go so that when you have the opportunity to do more, you're capable of doing it without jeopardizing your brand or your principles. And I think the more people that can stay focused on that mindset, you'll see less hiccups between the 500 to 5,000, the 5,000 to 15,000, you know, the 15,000 to 50,000 jumps, because it's always new equipment. It's always, you know, something else that has to get integrated into your space. And if you have a plan, even if you never use it, like at least you had a plan in place that you could execute if you have the opportunity. There's nothing worse than like having people want your product, but you physically can't make it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's also like, you know, I'd say with new kind of brewers that are opening up or inspiring to open up, I think you hit up on something that was pretty important too, or kind of like it is that, you know, as much as the demand it exists as the tap room, like the tap room always, you always like, I understand per seat and all that kind of jargon, but like, it's hard to argue, you know, more production space versus more tap room on paper. But when you look at the longevity of like how we're trying to do in the future, like you need that production space because it allows you the space to do everything correctly and without taking compromise on the space that you have. So I think that's a pretty huge step.
That's a good point on balancing the tap room versus the production space, though, because you want to. I mean, tap room is where the biggest revenue generator for you is,
Right.
but it there is a point where you might you really would have wanted that extra 500 feet, right?
Always want more space. And
Right?
the tap room yells it too. And they're like, oh my God, I need more space too. I need to do weddings or whatever.
Oh,
But
sure.
just
Kitchen could always be bigger. There could always be more private dining
always be better.
space.
Yeah, right. Especially the
Uh,
kitchen. We can't not continue this without saying the kitchen always wants more space too.
it's
Right.
true. And I mean, hey, when the food's good, give them as much space as they need.
Yeah. Do you guys have in your, you always have, or I should say this, do you guys have on-site food as far as food trucks go, or are they catered, or do you guys have an on-site kitchen per se to serve people? And what do you think, which one of those do you think was important? Because now that you have a production facility, obviously there's no tap room there, or there is a tap room there actually. Tell us the difference between them and what you've learned between having both of them.
Integrating food has been a huge thing. We used to run food trucks. No offense to the food truck community, they were a little unreliable, and like the weather was bad, they just might not show up, which was a little bit of a headache for all of our GMs. But with all the new build outs, so like the Highlands Ranch location was the first one that we put a purpose built kitchen in, and it actually integrated the menu that we worked with. Culinary creative to design, and it's all German inspired, like German-esque food. There's a certain amount of American twist on some of it, but we tried to provide, you know, like the sausage plate, schnitzel, spatzels, you know, currywurst, things that you would find in a traditional, you know, German beer hall. We wanted to have that be part of the experience because food is a big aspect of beer as a culture, right? Like
Mhm.
beer in a brat, very common thing. You know, we wanted to be able to provide that to people and help to, you know, enhance the authenticity of the entire experience. You know, really bringing the German beer hall experience to Colorado. And Highlands Ranch was the first location where we were able to really do that. We did that at the same time as we integrated the kitchen into the Low High location, which is the one where you and I met at. And
Mhm.
then Northland is the kind of headquarters, and so it's the biggest of the beer gardens, and it's one of the bigger kitchens that we run, and it has all of the new and fun uh, test foods, like a Jaeger schnitzel now that is
Mm.
delicious. It's very, very, very awesome. But I think food's a critical part of the beer drinking experience because it allows you to hang out and enjoy a little bit longer. You're not, it's not just one thing. You're going there for drinks and then now you have to go find food. Being able to satisfy both in one place is super helpful. It creates more of that sense of community than just, only servicing for beer consumption. For me, high quality beer, high quality food, and an ambiance that makes you feel like comfortable is kind of the standard that you want to set as a brewery. And I think that our team as a whole has done a really good job of putting that together. I think it's a very warm and welcoming environment.
Yeah, you can kind of see how, if somebody goes, especially with what you're giving them. Like, so if I'm going as a consumer to go into your place, I see all the Prost brand. I see all the German influence, and then if I get the German beer, whatever it may be, and to have that food on site is really just, it's the whole experience. And I think that's just so cool, and that, aids to your mission statement about, staying true to what you are doing. And I think that's awesome. Like, a high-tech facility, making sure everything's like ran in the best quality product with all the way to the food and seating. That's awesome. Because I'm sure you guys do events too, right? Like weddings and all that stuff. Do you have event halls or?
Oh yeah, we learned from the Highlands Ranch build out. This is where I was like, you always want more space. We put in 3 separate private areas. So there's a smaller kind of almost conference room where people can rent out. It's about like 20 people. There's a party room that we can rent out. There's like a couple hundred people. You can rent out the 4-season patio. So we have a patio that we built in that we can either have the bay doors open to the outside or the bay doors open to the inside, and people can rent out that entire space for private events, and that holds a couple hundred people. And so I think that hosting private events is super useful for the business end of it. I think being able to do that while staying open to the public so that people aren't being, shut out from the experience and wanting to come in and, visit their brewery. Like, I think being able to have both we're really fortunate in that regard. And our architect that we worked with, Dustin Hawk at Hawk Architecture, did a really great job when we were trying to conceptualize this space to make sure that we were able to accommodate those things. And so it's been fun to see how it all took shape and how people are using the space. Sometimes it wasn't exactly how you imagined, but sometimes the surprises are even better. So
I often tell people that are building new breweries, I was like, people are just working constantly, we're just working we're trying to open up the space. And my thing is like, enjoy your space, because once you open those doors, it's not your space anymore. It's all the people that come to visit, because it's their space.
exactly.
And so you'll continue to try to make that space the best for them. But you are now sharing the space, like,
Mhm.
can't leave your hammer around anymore. You gotta
Nope.
in the living room.
That's what 5S is for, sir.
Oh yeah, we're very much in 5S too. I totally
Right.
know. I wake up and I hear it in my dreams. It's 5S.
It's true.
But I think that's awesome. I think that's really good stuff there. I think that, you know, just to kind of like summarize that, like, when you build a place for people to visit and be a part of community orientation, but also like it's also businesses too, and for them to be able to rent a space out and then share a different aspect of it, it's just great. It shows that you've really thought about a lot of things and in the design and creating such a big building. That's just a wonderful job. It's really cool. I can't wait till I come out there. I haven't seen the new build out. I've seen pictures from you along the way, which are awesome, and time-lapse videos, which are my favorite. But it looks really awesome. I think it's cool. Your branding has just evolved, which is really fun too. So I guess that kind of leads us, now that we understand all the locations, what they were kind of doing, like basically, what future products you have there. I remember throughout our friendship, you tried to do, you were distilling certain things and trying to do like a project where you were trying to age things hyper fast and like moving barrels and stuff. Like any projects like that coming on?
This has been my primary focus, getting this kind of up and stable, and I can kind of start spending a little bit more time on some of my other side projects. But the rapid aging worked. I don't think it's scalable.
Yeah, it
I
takes
don't.
up a
At
lot
least
of
I
room
don't.
too.
It's a lot of room. It was a lot of room, and the facility design would be pretty intense. I when I ran the numbers on it, I was just like, this is gonna be a really expensive bottle of whiskey.
Yeah, yeah, it's
And
cool. It's like,
it tasted fun. Like it was really unique. It was very tasty, but like there's just no way to scale it effectively. And so I think going back to the drawing board on that a little bit, it's focusing more on, wash design and like working with my distiller friends on like some of the processing through the still. I think that there's a way to run the still in a similar way to like a GC column where you can separate things by like temperature delta over time, then collect fractions and then blend those fractions back into like your ideal form of the whiskey. But that's next. And then I also just released a side IPA brand. I'm basically a contract partner to the production facility. And so I have a IPA brand that the beer gardens are kind enough to carry for me. That's been really, really fun to kind of see and grow. I wanted to see what would happen if you took all of these old world German brewing practices and applied them to like new school IPA brewing. And so the West Coast IPA is kind of like honestly, it's in my opinion, it tastes kind of like a German blind pig, which is one of my favorite IPAs on the planet. When I go to wine country with my wife, we always go to Russian River. It never disappoints. But that was kind of what I wanted, using all German ingredients for that one. And it still tastes like a very authentic old school West Coast IPA. Run that through the opens, horizontally lagered it. It was a lot of fun. Well, I'll put that in the care package for you as well. Yeah, but things like that. I mean, I'm never bored. And honestly, the contract brewing aspect of what we do as a business is keeping me very, very busy. I work with a lot of our clients on a regular basis to make sure that they're getting exactly what they want out of their finished products. And so that takes a lot of time because it's very interactive with them to kind of get their feedback on what they're tasting, what we're tasting as a team, making sure we're aligned on what the goal is for the finished product. And it's luckily been very, very small tweaks, and it's been more in the pursuit of like their perfect version of the beer, not necessarily flavor matching, but like how do we continue to push this forward, which I think is a sign of a good brewer. Is you're not satisfied with where it is. You're not trying to chase the last batch. You're trying to chase the next batch. Like, how do we continue to push this into a place where more people would enjoy it? Like more people think that this is like the standard bearer for the style of beer. Like, how do you work towards that end while staying true to the brand itself? And I think that there's a delicate balance there that it's worth pursuing. I find myself doing it pretty frequently here. I'm sure it drives our supply chain guy crazy, but I can't help myself. I think that the best beer has never been made, and it's on us to pursue that with everything that we make.
Yeah, I think that's brings up a really good point. Is like, you get to work with a bunch of people. You as the contractor get to make and see how other people's ideas kind of come into it and what they're trying to achieve, and that means that you have the most. I would say you have a very good grasp at what people are suggesting to do. But how do you personally see the beer world evolve?
I have this conversation a lot with people because if you talk to a lot of the macro breweries, I mean, even on the AB earnings call, I think it was last year, they thought that 12% of their total sales was going to become the beyond beer category, which was basically non-alcoholic products and things along that nature. And I think that the rise of Athletic, Best Day, even Deschutes pushing into the 0-0 space, Guinness 0-0, it's hard to ignore non-alcoholic as a viable and important pursuit for breweries. But to do that, you have to be built for it. Package pasteurization is a necessity more for food safety. Facility standards have to be higher because you're basically making a food product. And so you are a food producer at that point, not necessarily a brewery in the eyes of the FDA. And so it can be enticing for some people, but if you aren't built to do it, I wouldn't recommend it. I think partnering with somebody who is built to do it is the right move in that sense. We've had the benefit of working with a few non-alcoholic beer clients, and they share my sentiment around product safety and reproducibility. It's a very, very important thing for that space because you have to protect the consumer, and that is our first and foremost priority. And that's why we tunnel pasteurize all non-alcoholic beer. But I think that if I'm putting my crystal ball in, I think that that beyond beer category is going to be growing, and I think you're going to see a lot more people trying to get into that space in the next couple of years. And I don't think it's about there's the comments a lot from journalists that I talk to about, you know, the sober curious generation of the 20 to 30 year olds, and I don't necessarily buy that. I think that that generation is looking more for moderation. They want the social activity of drinking. They don't want maybe the after effects of overconsumption, but that's the same generation that's pushing for the legalization of weed and mushrooms, right? Like, it's not sobriety, it's just a different type of relaxation.
That's right.
And I think one kind of steers more towards solitude, because most people, or at least most people I know, if they have edibles, they're not doing it with a group of people. Like, it's to relax at the end of the day. Whereas the consumption of alcohol has always been and will continue to be a very community-based social activity where you can be around people and share in your shared passion, right? You know, it's one of my favorite things about the beer industry is being around those passionate people like you, and like what we've discussed earlier is the social component of beer is so critical to the growth of beer and getting people back to wanting to be around one another and, you know, share space together instead of isolating. I think beer is a great, you know, glue for that. It's a nice conduit.
So then we talked about NA beers, but what do you think about the THC market and how that's such a strong emergent thing? I mean, obviously that's more kind of held more verdict to like the state laws, but like as these laws get opened up, because that's what people are fighting for, how do you think that's going to play into our market?
That one's interesting. You'd have more experience with that one than I would, being in, you know, Minneapolis, but I've seen a lot of people trying to integrate THC into non-alcoholic beer. I've seen, you know, CBD compounds being formulated into seltzers and things like that. And I definitely think that there's a space for it. I think that people are asking for that. I don't think it's the mass market, honestly. I also, this might be my personal bias, like sneaking in. I don't particularly love the flavor of them.
Oh, yeah.
I find THC compounds to be very, very bitter and like very harsh.
Very bitter, very harsh, and very oily, like very medicinal and like very tarsh. It has like I know exactly what you're talking about, because I also I find to have the same view. That's where it's like I kind of feel that as they drink things, I think the positive things about that is that you can control more about what you want or like how much you want it, because you can just drink half or a quarter of it. Where if you take like what I've heard from all my people doing
is the last time you had a beer? I mean, when was the last time you opened a beer and drank half of it?
Yeah, well, that never happens, but you know,
right? Like,
yeah, but like the fact that they can control that though, and so if they only want half of it, say if it's a 5 milligram beer and they want half of it, or 5 milligram THC beverage, I think it's interesting that they can take half of it and they know how much they're putting in their body, and they know when it's going to hit them. I've heard a lot of them say like it's going to impact me in 5 minutes or whatever, but I think I've heard things that the edibles are more. What do they say? It's just harder to gauge when it's going to affect your body based upon what you ate there, is your diet or how much water you drank or whatever. So I think that them to be able to consume it, I think it's a product. I think it'll be here. I don't think, like you said, I don't think it's like a mass market thing. I think it's because I don't know. It hits me different when I tried them all. I guess I just didn't really like the feeling, but it's to each their own. But I think it's gonna take a chunk of the market away. I don't think it's major, but I just think it's interesting how the branding's happening. And I think that independently doing them, I think it's very difficult based on the cost it is. And I think there'll be a big playmaker that's going to come in and make everything really cheap again. And I think that's kind of the ongoing trend. But
yeah, I can see that. I can see that being a thing.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking for almost an hour. I've got a couple more questions for you that are kind of personal that I want to know, just to get to know you a little bit more. First of all, way back when, like, what was your gateway beer? What made you really think that craft beer was like this is the beer for me. This is what makes me want to get into this field as well. Like, what was your first moment for which beer you had?
Man, it's got to be it's got to be Black Butte Porter. It's right up there. That or Fat Tire, because
Yeah.
I mean, I'm of the generation where Old Chicago used to do like the $2 schooners of Fat Tire and like mini pizzas. So Fat Tire was definitely a staple in my life for a
That's
while.
awesome. Yeah, I remember we would take a snowboarding trip out west, me and my friends, and the whole thing that we were excited about is that we'd get to Colorado and buy we just go buy and we'd had to call in advance to liquor stores to make sure we get like a keg of Fat Tire. It was just
Oh,
fat
okay, great.
the whole time, and it was just amazing. I love that you brought that up. It reminded me of when
Did
I
you
was
ever? Oh man, did you ever have Blue Paddle at that point in time?
no, I've never even heard of that.
God damn, that Pilsner was so good. It didn't sell at all. Like for shit sales, but oh my God, that beer was so good. I was so sad when it went away. Like it was before its time, man. That
Yeah,
beer was so great.
I think
I hope they bring that back.
I think it's really cool because I'm from the Midwest and you're on the West Coast ish. So it's like I think it's really cool just based upon the perspectives of things of what we got really excited about. I think it's great. Like me, my gateway beer in the Midwest was Bell's Two Hearted. It was just and I every
Oh
time I have it, I love their consistency and it always takes me back to that first time when I was like I don't have to drink Blatz anymore or Bud Light or something like this is amazing, you know. So I think those are all good memories that we hold to ourselves as we continue on in our industry ways, and I think it's just awesome.
oh, absolutely. The other one was Shinerbach. Like Shinerbach was awesome. That beer was so good.
China Bach is
It
still
was
awesome.
It is awesome. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. Sorry, absolutely. It stays awesome,
It
never
stays
not
awesome.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then another question I have for you here is: out of all the things you can do now with all the skills and subset and respect for other breweries, what's your dream collab in the United States?
I mean, I already got to do it. I got to do it with you.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. That was the right answer. No, that's
I've been
awesome.
married for a while. I know how to answer these questions. Um, I think that if I had to choose one brewery that's not you, God, that's a really tough question. Um, it would be a toss up between getting to play with Russian River or Freem because I love everything that comes out of both of those breweries.
Yeah, really.
I think they both did a really good job of like building it right, and I just love what they get to do. Also, if you've never been to Frame, it just sits there right on the river. It
Mhm.
is one of the more picturesque patios you can ever see. I have a
Yeah, I'll have to check
panoramic
it
picture
out.
of it that I sent to everybody because I'm like, oh my god, they were allowed to build a brewery here, and it is just stunning visually. I would highly
That's
recommend.
awesome. No,
But
I'm always looking for new places to go. I'll definitely put it on my list. I haven't been there. I've been to Russian River, but the yeah, there you just named two just really top places, and that's really good. And it shows to everything you've done, and I have the most respect, and I can't wait for the care package. But it's great. It's also it's been great talking to you today, Chris. I just have to thank you from the whole community. Thanks for spending the time. The last hour with us has been just wonderful and answering all these questions. Thanks for coming, man.
thank you, sir. Pleasure to be here.
Yep. Chris will actually be back with us at the next episode of this show as the host that will be having conversation with a brewer of his choosing. That will be on air in about 2 weeks. So make sure you tune in for that. A reminder, visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on all social media channels. To support journalism in the beer space, also check out the patreon.com/aboutbeer, all about beer. And I'm Jeremy, and thanks for joining us.
First Tea is your source for Lapsang Shushan and a whole host of teas and botanicals for brewing. Find your fall flavors and aromas to liven up the autumn season by talking with the team at First Tea. Email info@firsttea.com. That's FIRSDTEA.com to find out more.
I'm Mike Stone from Jackrabbit Brewing Company in West Sacramento, California. I think a lot of breweries do not run necessarily just in time, but they're pretty close to just in time ordering for inventory. And I don't know one brewer in town that gets it right 100% of the time all year. It's really nice to have the ability to fall back on just driving the van over to the distribution center and buying what you need on the spot. It really adds a lot of flexibility to my brew schedule. It can allow us to run slightly leaner on the inventory side, especially for some of our base malts. Contact Malt Europe today and visit malteuropemaltingco.com.
Today's episode was also sponsored by our friends at Stomp Stickers. Stomp is a proud member of the Brewers Association that produces a wide variety of printed brewery products, such as beer labels, keg collars, coasters, beer boxes, and much more. Stomp's website features an easy-to-use design tool, low quantity orders, fast turnaround times, and free domestic shipping. Visit stompstickers.com and use code BREWER for 15% off of your first order.